Can riding a motorcycle or a scooter protect you against a pandemic? I'm Audi555, stay tuned and we'll find out if it does. So I know what you're thinking, as if being a motorcycle rider could protect you against being infected. But are you actually right? Look at it this way, health experts suggest to avoid being infected by an infected person to wash your hands or wear gloves, cover your face, and avoid being around people. Now, is that any different to riding a motorcycle? Of course it is. Or is it? Fact 1. Transmission. The nature of what we know of how this disease actually spreads is by being in close contact with infected people. Transmission occurs through infected people breathing, creating water droplets, or even coughing, and those minute particles eject out of their mouths or just float around in the air and settle on surfaces, which you could then touch. So could being a motorcycle rider protect you from becoming infected? Well, not really. But when you think about it, maybe it does. You see, not everywhere is in lockdown, not everyone is in quarantine, and depending on where you are, you still may have to go around town to get supplies or potentially go to work. For example, you might be a healthcare worker and you need to get to work. You see, as a motorcycle rider, you already have access to cheap, affordable transport. The alternative to this cheap, affordable transport of riding a motorcycle, well, that is to take public transport. We know from scientists that using public transport increases the risk of you contracting an acute respiratory illness or the flu by a factor of 6. We have no immunity to this disease, no herd immunity, no vaccination, so being around infected people would increase your chance of being infected, and this new disease has a very high infection rate. And to make things worse, it could be weeks before you even know you're infected, so you could be carrying on your daily life, infecting others unknowingly. So as a motorcyclist, yes, you can reduce the chance of you getting infection because you can actively go out there and avoid public transport. You can be on your own, on the commute to your work or to seek out supplies. So it certainly could help. And it also limits the ability for you, if you were to be infected unknowingly, to be able to transmit that infection onto others. Fact number 2, protective gear. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that riding a motorcycle is dangerous. That's why we have protective gear. Now, depending on where you live and how many brain cells you have in your head, the amount of protective gear that you wear will vary. For me, I ride with the protective gear that I can afford to wear. This basically means wearing my full-face helmet, wearing riding gloves, wearing full-length protective jeans, wearing a leather jacket with full sleeves, of course, as well as wearing boots on my feet. But does all of this protective gear protect me from contracting an illness? Does it keep me protected? The short answer is no. Of course it doesn't. But if you think about it, it just might. Let's start with the helmet. My helmet is a full-faced helmet, and it has this clear thing on the front, which us riders call a visor. Now, it would be nowhere near as effective as a surgical mask or even riding goggles that created a seal around your eyes. But if an infected person was to cough or breathe some air out into my direction and those infected particles were to pass through the air, there's a pretty good chance that my visor would do a good job creating a barrier to prevent them from entering my eyes. Now let me put it this way, if you had the choice between wearing the helmet or not wearing the helmet and being coughed on by an infected person, would you choose to wear the helmet or would you be happy to leave your face completely exposed? Now, I guess it depends on the situation. This would stop water droplets from entering your eyes, but it doesn't actually stop you from breathing in those particles. You see, there's a big gap underneath the helmet which you will be breathing in and out of. Some helmets like mine have a little flap that you can fold down to help reduce the amount of air that you're breathing from the front. You know, it's great for winter, but it's not going to be an effective barrier to stop those particles from going into your mouth and your nose. The way you could avoid this is by wearing a P2 or N95 mask over your face. Now those masks have a pretty good chance of stopping you from getting an infection as opposed to not wearing one. The infected water droplets themselves are quite large, so will be absorbed into the outside of the mask and prevent you from breathing them, as well as any particles that may be in the dust or whatever that you are breathing. Now during the recent bushfires we had, I rode my motorcycle down to Sydney, and because of all of the smoke hazard, I wore a P2 mask. At first I thought it wouldn't really work, but after wearing it, I noticed I couldn't smell the smoke anymore, and that was when riding the motorcycle with the mask underneath my helmet. Eventually, when riding, I needed to have a break, so I pulled over and I took the mask off, and once I did that, I could physically smell the smoke very noticeably. So to me, that means that the mask, although it's a different situation, was able to effectively block off those smoke particles and create an effective enough seal whilst wearing underneath the helmet with the helmet closed. So there's no reason why one of those masks wouldn't be just as effective if you had to wear it, as well as wear your helmet to protect you from being infected. Now let's look at gloves. Like these, most gloves are made out of leather and some of them are even waterproof. But would it effectively keep you safe? Well, that depends on you. See, when it comes to gloves, even surgical gloves, the protection that they give you ultimately depends on how you treat them. You see, if you're wearing gloves and you touch an infected surface, that infection will be on the glove. If you then go and touch your face is now infected. If you then go and touch your eye, or your mouth, or even eat food wearing those gloves, you could possibly now be infected. But if you remove your gloves, then wash your hands with hand sanitizer or soapy water for at least 25 seconds, then you might be just fine. But the key thing here is, if you are wearing gloves and you touch infected surfaces, you need to wash your gloves. If you don't wash them, they're not going to be as effective because you're going to touch things with your gloves. So you need to wash them using soapy water, maybe just wash them for like a few minutes, let them dry, or spray them with alcohol solution of at least 60% alcohol. Could you use hand sanitizer on the outside of your gloves? Probably, as long as it was above 60% alcohol. And that's the key thing here. If you use alcohol that's above 60% in its quantity, then it is an effective measure to keep you safe. If you use, let's say, store-bought vodka, which is 40% alcohol, the alcohol level in it is too low to actually kill any viruses. So you're better off using hand sanitizer. Or if you have it, you could use an alcohol solution such as isopropyl alcohol, which will definitely kill everything. So fundamentally, wearing gloves won't make you any safer unless you follow a strict routine of cleaning. So how about the rest of my clothes? Being my jacket and my pants and my boots. Will they protect me? I guess it's much like the gloves, being it's the way you treat them. You see, if someone is infected and they cough on you and those water droplets with the infection in it lands on your arm and you rub your arm in your face, you're going to get infected. Unless of course you were wearing your helmet and you couldn't actually touch your face because you had that physical barrier. On the plus side, just like the gloves, you could spray an alcohol-based solution onto your clothes if you were worried that the infection was on them. And the way that the alcohol spray would work is you would spray it on your clothes and let it sit there for at least 10 minutes. Or you could regularly wash your clothes by taking them off carefully, putting them straight away into the washing machine and washing them, then washing your hands, of course, because you had to touch your clothes on your hands to make sure everything was clean and sterilized. And in my opinion, and this is solely my opinion only, I'm not a doctor, but if you were to wear your riding gear and you had the option of wearing a riding raincoat over the top, being a jacket and full-length pants, then if you put them on over the top of everything, they're much easier to clean. In fact, you could tape up any seams with some duct tape, so you could tape up your wrists and you could tape up around your ankles. And if your pants and jacket were separate, you could definitely tape up around your waist. And then, once you've gone out for your ride and you've come back from ground zero, completely covered in water droplets that have the infection, you could then hose yourself off and wash yourself off with warm soapy water, or of course, spray yourself down with a solution of 60% alcohol. then hopefully when you took everything off, your clothes and skin underneath will be infection free. Fact 3. Riders can spread the disease. Now I know what you're thinking. How can riding help spread the disease, especially after the points that we just spoke about? Well, the truth of the matter is, if those appropriate protective measures are not put in place by all riders, then you can't guarantee that all riders won't be spreading the disease. For example, have a think about delivery drivers. A lot of people could be quarantined down in their houses, and these delivery drivers are delivering them their hot meals. In a lot of cases, these delivery drivers are riders, especially in urban areas. And if you think about it more, a lot of these delivery drivers are actually riding scooters or 125cc motorcycles just because they're cheaper to run. And they're riding everywhere to bring you what you're going to be eating. Now, these delivery riders, they might not have the option to take off sick leave. You see, a lot of them work as independent contractors and are not entitled to any sick leave, so they have to keep working, otherwise they're not going to get paid. Now, the major delivery companies are currently looking into this and are coming up with ways to pay their delivery drivers or independent contractors that work on a casual basis, if anything, 14 days sick leave if they are tested positive. But it's the testing that remains a big what if. You see, if they are sick but yet well enough to work, but can't afford to go to the doctor to get tested, will they get tested? And a lot of these independent contractors may not be citizens of your country that you live in. So here in Australia we have free public healthcare called Medicare, and that covers all Australian citizens. But if you're not an Australian citizen, are you entitled to this free medical care? What if your symptoms are just very mild and all you've got is a runny nose? Do you think they would have the option to just stop working and don't get paid? So you can't guarantee that these riders, and often sometimes drivers too, are going to be safe. But what you can do if you are utilising one of these services is leave a note on your order to say, please leave it at the front door, or leave it at the front of the apartment complex and I'll come down to collect. That way you're limiting your exposure to the delivery person. And if you wanted to add an extra layer of safety, you could spray down your delivery bag with 60% alcohol and let it sit for a few minutes. Of course, this isn't very feasible to spray down your food and let it sit in the cold for 10 minutes. So a lot of people will just pick up their food and bring it inside to their house. But if you do this, wash your hands before picking up your delivery. Then, when you've got your delivery inside, open the bag but leave the food in there. Then wash your hands again. Then you can then pick up your food from inside of the bag, and hopefully that will be enough to protect you. And if you were still worried, you could put your food in the microwave and heat it back up again, so that way it could kill any microbes or viruses that are in there. Now, all of this is very good, but what if you don't have any isopropyl alcohol or hand wash? And even if you're running low on soap? Well, in these instances, you've just got to do what you can do. You can just use water. It won't be as effective, but it is a measure that you can put in place. Well, there we go. So hopefully this video has given you a better understanding of how motorcycling can keep you safe from getting infected and the steps you could make to improve your chances. As usual, keep safe out there on the road, stay on two wheels and not on your head, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. Laters! And also, if you're savvy like me, you could brew your own alcohol at home so you're ready for a lockdown party, as well as creating your own hand sanitizer.